wonder, you need to use pro writing aid. That catches typos, that, like when I've read something 3 or 4 times, and then I send it through pro writing aid, it will catch the typos. Because after you've read it twice, generally, your eyeballs can see, because your brain knows what's supposed to be there, so
We're,
your eyeballs can catch up.
we're live now, just so everybody knows.
Thank you.
You can sit closer.
What?
You can sit closer.
My spot. I always say here, thank you.
Okay, guess let's start at 6 p.m. We'll call to order the regular planning commission meeting for Wednesday, March 21st, 2023.
Great. Chuck, you have been recently reappointed to the planning commission, so I'm going to go ahead and take this opportunity to swear you in. So if you can stand up and then raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Chuck Howard,
I, Chuck Howard,
do solemnly declare and affirm
do solemnly declare and affirm
that I will support and uphold
that I will support and uphold
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the state of Colorado,
the Constitution and laws of the state of Colorado,
and the laws and ordinances of the city of Idaho Springs,
and the laws and ordinances of the city of Idaho Springs.
and that I will faithfully perform
And I will faithfully perform
the duties
the duties
of planning commission member
of planning commission member
for the city of Idaho Springs,
for the city of Idaho Springs,
upon which I'm about to enter.
which I'm about to end.
Thank you.
We did it now.
I did it.
So efficient.
Okay, let's go to roll call.
Chair Cindy Olson,
Here,
Chuck Howard,
Here,
Don Reimer,
here,
Lisa Manifold,
Here.
Priscilla Krustelwicki,
Here.
Ken Slaymaker.
okay, so the first item is approval of the minutes for December 7th, 2022. We have a motion.
My motion to approve the minutes from December 27th. No, December 7th, I'm sorry, 2022.
We have a second.
Second it.
Okay, and then corrections. Let's see, on the second page under board discussion, the very last paragraph. And Mr. Chipman advised that there are plans to move. Got it?
Does the last paragraph start with Mr. Kane also advised?
Nope, city administrator, Mr. Marshall, under board discussion,
The last paragraph?
the last paragraph on that page.
Which page? Sorry.
This one says new business at the top.
Oh, so, okay, I was on that, yeah.
So the bottom paragraph. Got that one?
Tell me again what to correct.
Here for there, Mr. Chipman advised that there are plans.
Got it.
And then on the last, not the short last page, but the next page. The very top is proposed fees are over 20 years. So that third paragraph down. Right in the middle, Tara Olson mentioned that she would be okay with a refund.
Instead of OM. Got it.
OMG.
Any more?
That's all I had.
I have 2. That same page, the third line at the top, assistant attorney Kick Klein.
Oh,
And then same page at the bottom, it just says, second to last line, would bring this up to the Public Works Department to see.
The nickname like.
Oh, yeah.
It's fine.
yeah.
You're turning in my fingers.
Okay, any other comments? So, all in favor? Say yay.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, next item is the public comment period. If anybody's here to give any public comment that's not an agenda item,
Yes, I
are
think
you
I,
here for that?
yes.
Okay,
Tentatively, nervously.
okay.
Uh,
So go up there, state your name and address for
Okay.
Linda. Perfect timing.
Hi, my name is Christian Hawkins. I live at 412 Colorado Boulevard. The thing that I came here for, I have no idea if I'm timing, like if my timing on this is appropriate at all, or I have no idea what I'm doing. But anyway, the White House at 1500 Colorado Boulevard, the one that a car went through. I heard through the grapevine that that house might be slated for demolition, and I just thought it would be worth mentioning that the town records and everything else show the construction date of the house is 1880. But you can see it in photos of Idaho Springs from 1869. And that combined with the architecture of the house leads me to believe that it is actually that old. The only photo from 1869 is one taken from the hill up there, so the house is far away, but I went up there and I took a photo from the same spot, overlaid it, and you can see it's the same house with the same roof line and the same profile. And I put together a tiny little hastily made PDF packet with the photos and things overlaid, and the architectural reasons, I think it's that age rather than being from the later 19th century. Yeah, okay, that's it.
Have you contacted maybe the property owner? Maybe they're
No.
interested in seeing some of that?
I have not yet, because this, I only took that photo today, and I only heard just recently that it was supposedly gonna get demolished. I don't know any of the process around it, any of it. I just figured that I would let some people know that I think it's much older than it supposedly is.
Jonathan has.
Madam Chair, I was just to say, I did receive an email from you today, and I will respond to you tomorrow about it.
Okay,
But I do have that information he was talking about, so we'll make sure that we follow up and we can talk about what I'm able to talk about the project.
okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Did he send you a copy of this PDF packet?
Yes,
Are we able to see that?
I have a printed
I would-
copy of it.
I
Well-
would recommend not.
Yeah, this is just, this
Okay.
is just, and
Yeah.
then he can get with Jonathan
Okay.
and if
I
it
sent
is
it
something to bring to
In a
us.
smorgasbord
Yeah.
email with other things to Jonathan
The-
there, so.
There may be implications in the future for
Gotcha.
planning commission having a conversation about this topic, but I certainly can have a conversation with you about it. So
Okay,
I think if we were to touch base, I can kind of explain
Okay.
the processes that may be relevant and everything.
yeah, I'm totally new to being involved in any way at all, even saying anything, so.
Well, coming for public comment is great, so we
Yeah.
appreciate
Right,
it too.
this was a good start.
Okay, good.
Thank you for sharing that kind of information that might be relevant for projects happening around here.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Thank
You're welcome
you.
to stay too. if you'd like.
Yeah, I'll sit around.
Okay, no other public comment. Now we'll go on to new business, the parking fee and loop program, and I'll give it to Jonathan.
I'm sorry, planning commission, you guys have been considering a new parking fee in lieu ordinance to amend our parking requirements downtown. This came out of conversations about our historic properties and the fact that our current parking restrictions very limiting for a change of use downtown. Attorney Klein would probably, I think, do you want to kind of cover the background for this one and where you guys are at this point in the process, since Mr. Chipman was working on this before me, so.
Sure. So, last time we spoke, you gave us direction to come back with an ordinance, and we have come back with said ordinance. Right off the bat, I do want to note in reviewing the minutes from our last meeting, I did see that the refund period agreed upon was 20 years. I somehow did not write that down in my notes correctly and thought it was 15. So you will see that 15-year number reflected in subsection I of the proposed new section 21-134. If you want, we can change that back to 20 years as suggested at the last meeting, or we can keep it at 15. Just to sort of quickly run through the meat of the ordinance. Subsection A simply lays out the purpose and the idea behind the program. B is the program boundary. That former city planner Chipman provided this map and this boundary area for us. The fee amounts are the amounts that we discussed and I believe were agreed upon at the last meeting. And as noted at the last meeting, these amounts are able to be adjusted via resolution really at any time. The one thing I wanted to really focus in on is subsection E, which provides criteria for the approval of a fee in lieu application. Now, some municipalities choose to have this be a right where you can simply provide the required parking or elect to do the fee in lieu and there's no processing behind it. Others have a review period of applications. Obviously, here is one of those situations where we decided to have this be a election that is reviewed and not an election by right. So if the commission feels that this should be something available to developers or property owners that they should be able to elect at any time rather than providing parking, then that's something to be considered. Also, just consider the sort of criteria that we've provided, suggested criteria. The only other pieces I wanted to point out were for the optional payment plan. We proposed a payment period of 10 years that could obviously be adjusted. And a refund of funds. If a building permit is canceled, then refunds can be submitted if a request is submitted within 3 months of the date of the cancellation of the building permit. Would also appreciate some input on that time period as well. And obviously, we are here to answer any other questions and be part of any other discussion.
Okay, I had a couple of questions, which you hit on each one. So G, the optional payment plan. So there's no reimbursement for payments. So say a person is on a 10-year plan and they decide, okay, I don't want to do it that way anymore. There's no reimbursement on the monies they've paid.
No, unless it.
Unless it falls under that permit. Okay,
Yeah.
I guess it doesn't really say that there's no reimbursements. I mean, maybe I was just thinking that way. But I'm also thinking about when the property changes hands. Say you turn around and sell the property and now that new property owner, even though he was paying for it because he didn't meet the guideline of having the parking spots, how do you make the next owner keep paying it for that 10 years?
Well, I think the agreement, attaches to the property.
For the sale of the property,
Yeah.
right? I
And
would think so.
I was gonna say, if there's a change of use required that has a different parking requirement, then it would require new. If it like an expansion of parking or whatever, it would require.
Additional,
Right.
yeah. So I guess we need to address that too. I guess that's a good one. I hadn't even thought of that. So I'm just looking at the person that did do this and then they decide they don't want to do it anymore, but yet they still are on a 10-year plan. And to me, it's like, okay, they don't have to do it. They don't have that use anymore. They're not doing that as a business that has the parking, but they can't come back and then ask for their money back.
Yeah, and
I agree with that.
But this doesn't say any of that. I guess that's what I'm wondering is, shouldn't we have something in there that says that there are no reimbursements except for the ones you were talking about where when they pull the permit and stuff like that?
I think that's fair. I also think that that could be something that could be just addressed in the language of the agreement that, is executed between the property owner and the city. And
Yeah,
doesn't
but
necessarily have to
that's-
be in the code.
That can be,
I.
that can be selective in the sense of if they catch that, or maybe 2 years from now, 6 years from now, you have a different administrator and they change the language in there, not understanding the purpose
I think it
of
needs to
that.
be in the code.
Yeah, it's almost like it needs to be in here
Mhm.
so it can be followed on for years and years and years.
Okay, so something along, like, something addressing sort of cold feet or a
Or change
reverse
of use, if they're
position.
going into a change of use and they have decided after 6 years, they don't want to do any one of these 3 categories. You were able to enjoy that for 6 years, you don't get your money back.
Right, but would it be just necessarily change in use? I mean, it could be just somebody who buys the property and decides, you know what, I'm gonna put a playground there,
You may
a
have
little playground instead of
You could-
parking, and now,
If you had somebody on a payment plan, the other thing that could happen is if you have a change of use that requires less parking spaces, they may say that they should be rebated
Yep.
for that other parking space.
that's a good one too. So I think we need some language that covers all of that, that says, no, there is no reimbursement except for under those.
The building permit.
Okay,
I mean, does that sound too harsh, or does that, I guess I'm thinking of the guy that, okay, has the property, has a playground there, say it's a little motel or a boutique motel or something, and then decides to take the playground out and add the parking. Well, now I want my money back instead of paying for the parking, because now I'm gonna provide the parking.
sure, but, and, we wouldn't be giving them the money back, because
But
that's,
we're not saying we're not going to.
yeah, but I agree that
Okay.
it should be said. I think it could be said in the contract, but I don't see a reason why I couldn't say it in here either.
Okay. So are we approving this to pass on to council?
That was the hope for this evening.
Right.
If we have changes, one option would be, can we conditionally approve this with those changes in the, or,
Sure.
Yeah.
And then council is made aware that gets passed upon adding those
Yep.
changes.
and we could include the new version in.
Yeah, the version that goes to council would include.
Yeah.
Whatever is discussed tonight.
Okay. Okay, so, I don't know, is everybody in agreement that that needs to be added? And then it goes on to the next page on number 1. I know we talked about where the monies go, and it's a fund that was developed, but the fund isn't just for the parking structure, is it for the maintenance and updating of all parking in the historic district?
That fund is actually dedicated to O&M for the parking structure and all the parking lots downtown essentially. But
Okay,
it also is dedicated to downtown improvements. So in theory, it could be used for curb and gutter, sidewalks, stuff like that as well.
so I guess I was looking for clarification. Return of the funds, fees collected. 15 years. Okay, so a person can get a refund after 15 years if the money's not spent. Where did I read that?
That's in section 1 on
That's
page
the one,
4.
okay, so that's where my question is.
I was gonna
If
ask
the
you guys about
fees
that.
have not been spent by the city within from the date of the fees were paid, then they get a refund. Well, how are you gonna prove that the funds hadn't been spent?
One other potentially unintended consequence of this clause is that a lot of these projects are very expensive to create, and even the O and M stuff may not happen on a schedule that aligns with this.
Right.
And so if we're intending this money to be used for maintenance of parking facilities in the future, that time frame may be arbitrary into what we actually have. Like, for instance, in 10 years, we may need to do some sort of, I don't know what might be required for the parking structure, but something big.
Right.
And we may want to save that for a capital project like that potentially. So that would be that was what I wanted to bring to you this evening.
Is you had questions on that
Yeah,
one
just a
too?
timeline, because the project that it may be used for that could enhance our capacity managed project may be
Right.
more than that down the road.
So we should go to the 20 years, which is what we had talked about. I guess the part I'm still concerned with, if the fees have not been spent by the city within 20 years from the date of the fees were paid, to obtain a refund, the present owner must file a written request with the city administrator. How are you to show them that those fees were
Practically
spent?
impossible.
I
because
was gonna say they would be spent
they-
because you're gonna use it on other parking and curb and gutter.
There are also gonna be other funds in that account, because there's gonna be money from parking revenue and then citations and things like that. So unless we create a line item for every single fee that we create and then track it in accounting, it would be difficult. And I don't know how.
So is
That
yours,
is the impression that I got from other municipalities that do this, is that they do exactly that, to sort of track exactly,
Wow.
where the money is going throughout the process. But, I do hear you that it would be difficult for someone to track all of this.
but we talked about this though, that it was only like what, 20, maybe 25 buildings? So yes, it is a little bit more onerous from the accounting standpoint, but if you're tracking 25 line items, I don't know, like,
It would be difficult because they would all have a GL code like you see in the budget. And so basically, we'd have to say we bought 7 light bulbs from account two. We bought,
okay,
and then what happens if we have a project that's $200,000? Like, how do we combine those funds? So that's where it might be.
okay.
The other thing with this is that, what if I spent $19,000 out of $20,000? Do I get a rebate for the remainder, or is it 1 cent out of that account, or?
So is your suggestion, that we take, I'm sorry.
That's okay, just keep, finish.
Just, is your suggestion that we just remove the return of funds?
That was gonna be my question, like, is this a thing that has to be in it? Like, cause I mean, maintenance is gonna happen forever and ever.
Right.
So why do we have to offer to refund them?
We don't, I just wanted to give you guys some options.
Yeah, no, attacking you, sorry, I'm just like wondering.
No, I hear it.
I think it might have come out of a discussion because we had a lot of, other municipalities that had this, that did return of funds and stuff like that. So I think that might have come from.
So it almost looks like we would delete number 1 and then J, the refunds of funds is the one where they can appeal to the city administrator to get if there's those other situations.
Yeah.
But shouldn't we clarify somewhere in here that the funds are going to this parking fund
It does say
It
that
does
on
in H.
subsection
in the one
H.
before? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You could alternately create a prorated system whereby if I have used parking for a certain number of years, there could be like a prorated refund potentially. That might be another way to accomplish it, because that fund will just be, there will be like a parking fund or whatever. And if you say, like, if I use it for less than 5 years and I paid for 20, or however you look at that, you could say you could be prorated part of it potentially, because then you don't have to track each account individually.
But how do you know that you didn't spend part of their money
Yeah.
on?
I was thinking that if you had, like, say you had, right now that account has $400,000. So if I have $400,000 and I have a business that went out of, like, say they had an issue, so they went out of business very quickly. And there was a change of use that required a different parking thing or something, whatever the reason that triggered this, you could say you were in operation for 18 months. We anticipated this being like a 20-year, like covering 20 years of use or whatever. And you could prorate, based on time in theory, but
Now you're going back though to the previous thing, because that's different than this line item that we're talking about on I here, where it's talking about if the city hasn't spent the funds. But now you're going back to where if somebody says they changed their mind, I want a refund.
yeah, and I was thinking more along the lines of if you're out of business and there was like If you, just as another alternative, but I see the downside to what you're saying there too. And if we needed to track them all, we could. It would just require a very significant conversation with our accounting department to make sure we could do it.
I'm fine with eliminating I. As long as we're clarifying that the monies are going to be spent, going to the parking and infrastructure, and then that J, refunds of funds, that's a whole different reason where the building permit and stuff like that. Say they paid it and then their whole project collapsed. It's not somebody that's doing something 5, 6 years later, 10 years later. What does anyone else say? So we're talking eliminating I.
I was gonna say that maybe, would it be possible to say something like eliminating I and saying that any funds after so many years will be used for community improvements, maybe not necessarily just parking, because if they haven't been spent because there's extra money, I assume, but be used only on community improvements, or maybe on a project that the residents get to vote for, choose which one money is spent on. But then also in H, it says that the fund is restricted if that's where we're gonna be putting the money, so that wouldn't allow us to do that, right?
It's an enterprise fund, which is governed by TAPER, and so it has to be used for downtown improvements.
Okay.
What downtown improvements is a little bit flexible in its meeting.
Mhm.
So the other thing is potentially it would delay this project, but we could talk about potentially creating another fund for this. And that would make it easier to track. It's just with the downtown improvements fund, it would be, there's a lot of funding sources there. So that's where it would become challenging.
I don't have a problem with it. I think it going to that fund is great. I think it's a great fund for it to go to, and people know that that's what's it being spent on, not somebody 10 years from now deciding who your council and say, oh, we're gonna spend it on this instead.
Yeah, that's
This
what I
way
think
people
can
know
vote.
that it goes in there. Yeah, but if you go to the voters and stuff, then that also costs money to pay for the election and all that stuff too, so.
I think if we're gonna charge a fee that is addressing parking issues, it needs to
Stays
be
in
a
parking.
parking fund or a fund that because downtown gets a lot of abuse as far as use and abuse. So I would rather, my personal rather would be that it's staying in the parking
In
fund.
this, yeah.
Because I like the idea of people voting, but I'm like, if we're charging for a parking, like fee in lieu of parking, I would rather go into
Actually,
parking.
yeah. Yeah, the other thought is like also the talk, about the parking and all that kind of drama. Sometimes I feel like maybe a different fund will be better. But if everything's for parking, then it doesn't really make sense.
One thing, another
Parking and
way,
improvements and maintenance.
another way to look at it is that the parking improvement fund, enterprise fund, was created to manage tourism impacts on the city of Idaho Springs. And so the tourism impacts primarily happen at exit 240 and in the 3 blocks of the historic district, which is where the boundary here is drawn. While some of those improvements may not directly be creating new parking spaces because we have such limited opportunities to do that, they will be used to do things like improve wayfinding, improve lighting, improve curbs and gutter, the street, probably eventually utilities in the street we could use it for. Anything like that could be used for that purpose. This wouldn't be used to, we wouldn't use this like to purchase flowers or something like this. It would be infrastructure improvements, serving transportation and mitigating the impact of tourism on residents. And, there's some other projects coming up where we're going to try to better funnel traffic off 240 into the downtown parking so we don't get people on Wall Street and things like that. So from that perspective, this funding will all go towards that same purpose, which parking is part of, so.
Let me throw a curveball there. I like what you're saying, but if we're going with that, like, why wouldn't we just also include these 2 spots there that are right there?
The two,
Yeah, next to it, exit 240, like the little triangle and the block on top of it.
that will come and go as the part above there.
Uh-huh.
And then the smaller bit will be used for transportation infrastructure once the mobility hub project begins.
And that's kind of what I was,
There will not be parking
the
there, I
connection.
think is why.
what?
There will not be any parking there, and that will be managed by
But is-
CDOT funding for the,
Okay.
because that's where the bus turnaround in theory would be in the bus stop.
when you talked about walkability and wayfinding and connection, that's kind of what I thought, because
Yeah.
if that's gonna be a transportation hub, we might wanna connect them
Yeah, well, I
to
agree.
that area.
That fund is dedicated to the historic district, and so this is, I think that's where Jared was going, was trying to draw the boundary of the,
Of the history.
Yeah. and you can see it's a little more than that too, so that would be a potential we could.
I think unless this outer line that is the program boundary that we discussed last meeting is coterminous with the historic district, it really doesn't have much to do with the fund, because this program boundary is simply the properties that are eligible to elect to
To do this,
participate.
Right,
And the fund boundaries could be different than what this map shows.
This map could be modified in future iterations of this ordinance if desired by the
Sure.
planning commission too.
Yeah,
so I get it, yeah, it's the properties there that are eligible for this program.
yeah,
That
not
boundary.
necessarily
Right,
where the funds are gonna go.
right. Okay, that's all I had was those two main things.
So then funds could be spent everywhere in that area beside, not just in that blue line,
It has to be,
it has to be in that.
I want to say it probably needs to be in the historic districts, but
Mhm.
we need to look at the Tabor language of that fund and make sure that we understand the boundary, and we could bring that back to planning commission about what that boundary
So you're
is.
not sure what the Idaho Springs Parking Enterprise Fund boundary is?
It says it's for downtown improvements, meaning the historic district, zoned historic district. In the parking lots, I think is the intention.
Okay.
And that probably does include the area you're talking about, that, the triangle area that might. be used for
Probably it does,
mobility hub.
or it doesn't.
It probably would, I think, based on what we've been talking about.
And I have no problem with that, whatever the Idaho Springs Enterprise Fund is because we're saying that's where the money goes, so that's fine. And what buildings apply to it, that's a different, separate thing, so that makes sense.
I have one question. So should Idaho Springs enact more than one historic district? Would that also be part?
We can,
But it's,
so there's.
No, I have a reason, there's actually a reason I'm asking.
I know where you're going. The Historic Preservation Review Commission is probably going to undertake work to look at whether or not there should be additional historic districts in Idaho Springs. There's been at least 2 recommended to the city that we create in the near future. Plus, we should likely start a new program to begin landmarking properties in the city that need to be landmarked, because we haven't done that in a while.
Mhm.
This is something that's going to be ongoing and a big focus for Historic Preservation Review Commission. It will be this work. I think that there likely could be a really good reason to, in the future, look at whether or not this ordinance should be expanded, because we are going to have change of use issues in other parts of the city. But I think one really good benefit of passing this ordinance with this map and this boundary is that it will give staff time to set up a program that could functionally work. Now, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the language here allows us a little bit of flexibility. If we are able to track individual accounts, that we could potentially do that. But we also have the flexibility to put it in the larger account if we need to. I
Sure.
think. So what I guess I'm trying to say is that in the future, if we build a model here that works, we may be able to overlay it in other areas where it's appropriate. Maybe not East Colorado Boulevard, but maybe if there's a little bit of C2 on the west end of town, for instance, where this may be appropriate, where instead of going through a variance process, we have some other process.
Mhm.
So I would recommend that building this program from the staff perspective and getting the functional kind of all the bits and pieces working, the contract and everything might be a good idea. And then the funding, we can provide an update to planning commission and keep working on some of these issues, I think, that are matters of interpretation, if that would work.
And I think a good deal of sort of the operation of this will be in the agreement itself. And this ordinance more is setting up guidelines and approving and authorizing the program. And the more nitty gritty stuff would be in the contracts that developers sign.
Are we talking though all about this point, at this point, about removing section I on page 4?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
I was under the impression that we are doing that.
okay.
Yeah.
So where we're at is removing I and enhancing the language in G.
Yep.
Where there's no refunds. Change of property, all that kind of stuff, something that shows that it's all inclusive. You're in it forever,
Yeah,
unless you can meet J.
yeah, shall you elect to, for an optional payment plan, and any funds paid are not refundable. And, so far as them being on the hook, the rest of those funds, when they want to get out of that, that would be something that would be in the agreement itself and not really in here.
As long as it says point blank, no refunds.
Yeah.
And I see what you're saying. You don't want to go into the detail of new ownership, changing, new architect, new whatever.
If they
Just
decide not to
absolutely
pay.
no
But
refunds.
I think if you say no refunds, that allows for the more specific language in the agreement, in the contract.
Yeah, which if they miss something, then it still means no refunds.
I would like to request clarification because I feel like I just made a scramble in my brain. The main thing for me about this is that I would like these funds to be able to be used in the areas where connectivity, where transportation happens. Keeping not just cars, but also, humans. And my worry is that because we're tying it with the historical district, that is just gonna stay there only. And correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Well, we're tying it to the Idaho Springs Parking Enterprise Fund. So
That's what I'm
whatever that
asking.
language of that fund is where it's going. We don't have control over what that fund says right now. It's already there. They've
I know,
already.
that doesn't help my confusion, sorry.
So, I can tell you what we're doing to make this, and it might answer your question.
Mhm.
We're building, the intention of Idaho Springs right now is to build a multimodal connectivity hub at exit 240 of Interstate 70. It'll include a redevelopment of transportation-related infrastructure through the 3 blocks of downtown Idaho Springs,
Mhm.
as well as transportation-related infrastructure on both the north and south side of exit 240, to include things like new sidewalks, potentially a roundabout at exit 240 to slow traffic coming from the highway into town, and to make it more clear for visitors to know where they need to go when they come. So one potential, I know that you're very familiar with this issue, but we get 14th in Colorado situation when parking gets really bad or traffic.
Yeah, I
So we're trying
remember
to-
that, thank you.
We're trying to use design to maybe mitigate some of those issues.
Okay,
So the vision for downtown Idaho Springs and this mobility hub is that we'll have affordable and attractive mass transit service to the city every hour, and in the near future, every half hour, which will mean that people can commute to the city from Denver, people can commute from the city to Denver to, points west all the way to Vail, using Bustang, Project Pegasus, and the roundabout too. And we're trying to build infrastructure that will support all of those uses. And then there will be connections to the Clear Creek Greenway that will allow travel up and down the Greenway, multimodal travel, which makes it possible. I just realized this, but you can access Stanley Road in like 5 minutes on that trail on the other side of the highway, which is pretty cool. So that's the intention, is to build this really multimodal driven network of transportation throughout Idaho Springs, and to build people-centered infrastructure on Minor Street so that we can use it the way we have been for the last several years. Like, so it's a people street in the summertime, and in the wintertime, we can use it for other transportation needs as required. And it'll be easier to change and safer to change because it'll be a better streetscape. And so a lot of that design work needs to happen still. We just submitted a grant yesterday to the Federal Department of Transportation for planning and engineering for the overall project. And then we're going to be submitting a couple more grants. One piece that's really critical is to potentially build a pedestrian bridge from near the rec center across the highway. And so that's the next big funding piece that we have to do. So all of this work is in that context, because as we start looking at the mobility hub, We realized that increased parking capacity with the management practices that we already know work will allow us to really focus on making sure that changes of use can happen downtown, because we're going to run into a resiliency issue where changes of use become more and more impractical. And I think the last thing we really want to see is that downtown starts getting threatened because people just want to build a new building that they can have their business in. So this allows us to contextually manage that parking. And also, this is kind of like coupled with the residential parking permit program, because we can manage residential parking too and make sure that people can park near their homes. So between the two, this fee in lieu allows that change of use to happen. I can tell you from staff perspective, this is becoming a very real issue downtown where changes of use are too onerous for people to accomplish. And we're gonna see empty businesses because of it. You know, we do have empty apartments downtown that could be occupied if it were not for the parking situation. So ultimately, this downtown parking fund is going to fund the operations and maintenance of the whole mobility hub, except for CDOT's going to participate too for their piece of it. And then it's going to fund all the infrastructure maintenance and improvements that we need, which is not, you know, the intention would be to make it Minor Street. It's always going to be Minor Street, and not to mess with Minor Street, but just to make it so we don't have the pedestrian vehicle impacts downtown that we do on Minor Street when that happens. There's been over 50 accidents since 2019 directly around exit 240. Some of those have resulted in fatalities as well. There's been rollovers and the semi that rolled over recently, all those kinds of things. So building this infrastructure is going to allow us to way better manage contextually the traffic coming from I-70 into Idaho Springs. And so this fee in lieu program really, you know, I think for the last several years, since I've been here, you know, the parking downtown's always been a thorny issue from a planning perspective, because we just don't have it. And so by building our capacity and then creating a little bit of flexibility in the code, we should be able to manage contextually all the different competing uses that happen in such a constrained area.
Didn't you say, I think in the last time we discussed it, that you knew specifically of people that would like move towards offering in residential spaces?
Yes, I believe
If
there's,
we had a parking in the theater. Am I remembering that
I believe
correctly?
there's 19 units of housing downtown that could be operational if not for parking requirements.
Well, then the next thing is, are people willing to pay this fee, you know?
The other
So does the public been informed of this, or businesses and
There's
residences?
been over 45 meetings of public
Yeah.
meetings
Of the
about this
tran-
project.
Transit stuff, yeah.
And there will also be additional meetings throughout this project to make sure that it's a public informed design. We'll have probably this summer, there'll be another kickoff of that project. There's been, the entire downtown district has been engaged, every property owner, many residents, there's been surveys about it. I know that there's been, from public meeting perspective, just public meetings, there's been 45 that's been talked about in Vitality Task Force. And other meetings, probably a total of about 75 times.
So the people, in other words, know what's going on, they know what they'll have to pay.
Yeah, there's always,
The space and all that.
there'll always be more conversations. And I think one of the other things is that when you have a structure like this, when we start working on this innovative housing opportunity program that we just recently got a grant for, that'll be coming to planning commission too. And it gives planning commission some more flexibility for talking about, you know, real deal affordable housing. If that's something you guys want to tackle, it gives you a tool you can use for that purpose.
Okay, I just wondered, so, let's say Mr. X owns a restaurant and he wants to expand it a little bit. Does he know that he can't do it without parking spaces? Does he know that he can pay in lieu of the parking spaces?
And we've been really careful to present this as a conversation that planning commission's been having. We haven't decided yet. So I think people are aware that this could be an option for them, and I think people like this idea because they just don't have any options.
Okay, just so nobody's gonna come up and say, well, I don't know about this, you just slip it under the rug.
Yeah, and nobody
No,
will
it
be
works to their
required.
advantage,
Yeah.
because then they might be able to develop their property because they would be able to
Because
pay
they're
for
not
the
hemmed
parking.
in by the
Right.
parking
They're not
requirements.
told no because there's no parking.
And if they can meet the requirements without it, they can also do that. So if they have like, for instance, say we have a mercantile, like a good example would be the menagerie space that was recently vacated. If another mercantile wanted to come in, the same use, then of course they would not be required to change the parking. They could just operate it as it previously was operated. This would be more for like a business that changed use or greatly expanded, like you said, greatly expanded the seats available or something like that.
Thank you, John. That really helped me understand that this is not just like a isolated project for one spot. It's part of a whole bigger
Yeah.
plan for a
Yeah.
general plan for everything. So-
Yeah, and downtown may be more flexible than, I just wanted to be conservative in my estimate of what downtown means.
Mhm.
But in the language for the Tabor funds, that's also something that could be modified potentially if we decided that that was relevant, and that would be a conversation with city council. They have the authority to do that.
Okay, are we able to remove the Tabor link at all, or no, that has to stay?
It is a good idea for the moment with how that fund works, because it's parking management basically acts like a business in Idaho
Uh-huh.
Springs. And so it used to be tracked in a different fund, but the transparency in a fund like that is not the same as it is in an enterprise fund. And the Tabor limitations are great on what that means, because it means like a voter approved debt and all of those kinds of things. But it also has benefits too from just a public perspective. So I think there's always different ways to do it, but I think for now, it's probably a good idea for it to be that way.
Well, if we end up with other historic districts, we will need to probably take a look at that. Because if it just says historic district, that's all kinds of vague.
There's going to be, I think that maybe planning commission, when that conversation starts at HBRC, it may be even valuable to have a commingled work session. Because there will be a lot of implications on zoning if that happens.
Be prepared, it's this year.
Okay, does anybody have anything else? Any more questions?
I just was going to say, Nick had said something about the refund of funds in J, not to get back into, but the idea that the building permit is canceled, that they have to, they have 3 months. I think that's completely acceptable. 3 months is enough time to get your bits in order, apply for a refund. Like, I'm glad that it's not just a month. You know, if your building permit falls through, let's give you 3 months to get it together. I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Okay, so with that, we need a motion to move this to city council for approval. We're given our approval and for it to go to city council with the changes that we've talked about. The other option is the changes be brought back to us, which would delay this longer till the next meeting. If
And
we
all
wanted
the
to see the
changes-
changes, or if we're confident in the changes that we'll see.
All the change that we're requesting is to remove I, right?
Remove I
Clarification in G.
and clarification in
Okay.
G that there's just no refunds.
You could add those as condition of approval, right? Or- Yep, okay.
And that's fine to do it that way, right? We can do it.
Yeah, I don't see
contingent.
why not.
Yep. Okay, so do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve an ordinance amending section 21-125 and adopting a new section 21-127 of the Idaho Springs Municipal Code to establish a parking fee in lieu program conditionally with the changes to section G on page 3 and removal of section I on page 4.
Second.
Roll call?
Cindy Olson,
Yes.
Chuck Howard,
Yes.
Don Reimer,
Yes.
Lisa Manifold,
Yes.
Ursula Kuzumi,
Yes.
Ken Slaymaker. Thank you.
Great. Any other business? We don't have the update on here. You're not prepared for that or anything?
I know, I will provide that at our next meeting.
Okay, with that, we'll adjourn the meeting and it is,
Nice.
oh, sorry.
Something that just occurred to me while we were discussing. Section 5.3, subsection C of the code, not of the ordinance.
Oh.
In March of each year, the commission members shall elect a chair and vice chair to serve for the ensuing year,
Oh.
who shall be eligible for reelection. I guess this is something that could wait for our meeting on the 15th. I haven't been here for a planning commission election previously, but so I'm not sure if that's something that we could handle right now, or if that's something that.
I guess my first thought, it usually has to be an agenda item. Unless nobody cares.
It made sense to me that it would have to be an agenda item
Mhm.
and to push it to the next meeting,
Okay,
but I just wanted to see if anyone had any recollection from past, chair and vice chair elections.
No, I think, it just changed because of when Bill left.
Mhm.
And then I was nominated as the chair, and right now we don't have a vice chair.
Okay.
Because of when Kate left. So I would say, yes, let's put it on the next thing, because I've always believed too, there's supposed to be agenda items on the agenda.
Yeah,
We need time for public, like public knowledge of the agenda.
Yeah, well, what it is you guys will do it, who's the chair and who's the vice chair. Yeah. Okay. Does that sound good?
So the 15th.
Okay, with that, now we'll adjourn the meeting at 6:50.